Thanks again for joining me on my learning journey. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. I want to use this journey to explore students' equity and inclusion post-COVID, with special attention given to the vulnerable students in our population. The arrival of COVID-19 brought to the attention the failure of our education systems to address the holistic needs of the vulnerable children in our society. If these needs are not addressed, then the life outcomes for many children will be adversely affected. According to the OECD, students from various diverse backgrounds were the ones who were mostly affected by school closures during the pandemic. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, many of these students were already living in hardship because of their socioeconomic status. Some of these students were already displaced because of wars and, of course, gang-related issues. Some students had emotional scars associated with their life experiences based on the conditions at home. And in many situations, some of these students had no accommodations for their special learning needs. For many students and their families, food insecurity was also an issue before the pandemic. And let us not forget that most of these students had limited access to basic technology. We should also be aware that many of these students also experience a combination of the factors that I've mentioned. Hence, when the pandemic arrived, the situation became more severe. The reality is that our concept of schools across the world was based on physical spaces. One major component for a post-pandemic response is collaborative partnerships as it relates to open education resources. The collaborative partnerships would provide our most vulnerable students with quality learning resources. Furthermore, in the future, resources that are designed for use must be able to be deployed online as well as in a downloadable form. National media centers must also play a part and create special programs that must be updated from time to time and airplay if needed within a crisis. In addition, the content could be placed on websites for individuals to have access when there is still not a crisis, so you are prepared for both worlds. Countries must also facilitate the use of online platforms without allowing students to pay access fee. In summary, free internet connection should be the norm if we are to respond to any future crisis. All resources must be designed to support students with special learning needs. Within this context too, there must also be a collaboration with specialists who work with children who have special needs and require special accommodations, especially in a time of crisis. When students are located in remote areas, systems must be in place that will allow for the distribution of resources. For example, the post office, place of worship, and district organizations can be part of the distribution process. Having these places will allow the seamless distribution of resources during a time of crisis. There should also be a seamless system to allow individuals and private organizations to donate devices without having tax implications. The reality is that the COVID-19 crisis allowed us to understand what it means to have equitable, inclusive learning spaces. Many vulnerable students live in situations that are not conducive to learning. Therefore, policymakers, educators now need to examine learning spaces, and these learning spaces will need to be examined with the context of where students live. For example, a student could live in a shelter, a student could be displaced and in an organization, a student could also live in a family situation that is overcrowded and does not allow for that sort of work to take place. During COVID-19, the truth is that homes became schools, and with this transition came unexpected issues. For example, in Florida, a child's mother was shot and killed during an online class as the teacher watched. Any post-pandemic response must address the inequalities in our society. Therefore, if governments are truly to address these inequalities, there must be greater investment in early childhood education. This could lead to a government providing early learning centers that will support children and their families. It may also be the time to establish family case workers who will be deployed during a crisis. These family case workers must provide and connect families to needed support. Many students are affected socially and emotionally during any time of crisis. Therefore, it will be essential to design future social support systems that will provide a team approach for supporting our children. The team approach would include school psychologists, social workers, caseworkers, and other professionals. These professionals must understand what needs to be done when children and young people are under stress and connect them to the needed support systems. A post-COVID response must consider financial support for vulnerable families. And of course, you know this was needed in this time of crisis. During the crisis, many families lost their livelihoods and were unable to provide for their children and themselves. Therefore, governments must design support systems that will allow for financial support of their citizens during times of crisis. This support must be independent of political influences. Often forgotten are those who work during the crisis. I make special reference to teachers and support staff. It is therefore essential for leaders to consider the possible impact that future crises will have on teachers and support staff. Responding to these crises should not be a political one, but should be geared at providing teachers with the resources, skills, emotional support that is needed. In other words, there should be a national support. It will also be essential to ensure that teachers develop support systems for the sharing of resources, and of course, they share their skills with other teachers too. In summary, if we are going to develop a strong system for the future that drives equality, inclusion, and equity during a time of crisis, we must consider strong partnerships. In addition, we must consider where students will be learning, and this will require parental involvement. There must be a rigorous support system for all stakeholders, and there must be continuous professional development. This will not be accomplished unless you have substantial financial support, and that has to do allocation of funding at all levels. These are just some of my thoughts regarding building a system to respond to future crises. Thanks for listening, and please do join my channel and share this content.